Now on to chapter 21. Sorry for any delay there. It seemed was having trouble getting a recording going, but I think we're live now. The imperfect. We are now making progress with these tense forms, and there is a certain beauty in the Greek verb as we've looked at already. It has an ability to specify and to do so very succinctly in one word. In Greek, there are nuances communicated that take 4 or 5 or a couple of phrases in English at times, and we'll see that especially with participles, but here in the indicatives already, and the imperfect is a great example of that. The imperfect is one of the past time verbal tense forms. Now you know already that Greek verbs have two important components. One is time, but more so aspect. That is, the view that the speaker wishes for the audience to understand, or that the writer wishes for the audience to understand from his perspective. An undefined aspect, just that he saw it happen, or the author wishes us to understand that it happened, or a continuous kind of aspect, which is the present tense form that we've looked at already, that the action is continuing from his or her point of view, whether it's the speaker or the writer. The future that we've looked at, it happens in the future time, and the aspect is suppressed a bit because the temporal component is emphasized so much. But there are two past time verbal tense forms, and these we know of by the prefix that Greek attaches to the word. In English, we use the ed suffix. In Greek, there's a prefix, so just think of it that way. There are two past time verbal tense forms, the imperfect that we'll look at here in chapter 21, and then we'll look at the aorist in chapter 22, and then later in the textbook as well. Today, here, the imperfect. It is past time, but with a continuous aspect. That is, something was continuing on in the past. The aorist tense forms, they are normally past, though not always, and we'll think about that, but their main emphasis is an undefined aspect, simply reporting that something happened. And these use secondary personal endings that we'll look at in just a moment. But first, the imperfect. You may want to pause the slideshow here for just a minute, grab your Greek text, turn to Mark 1, or if you have it right beside you, you could open it up, Mark 1, 12, and 13. Let me just read these. I'm going to do this very quickly, but I want you to follow along, so pause the video if you need to. Mark 1, 12 and 13. Kai euthus top pneumad auton ekbale estain eremon. I'll just translate here. And immediately, euthus, which is a word often used by Mark, and its densest occurrence, I believe, is in Mark. Immediately, the Spirit led him, ekbale, to the wilderness. Verse 13, kai ein, that's an imperfect tense form, ente eremo tesserakanta hemeras perizomenos, hupatu satana, kai ein, another imperfect tense form, metaton therion, kai hoi angeloi diakonun auto. Now verse 13, and he was continuing, past, continuous, imperfect, in the desert 40 days, being tempted, present participle, perizomenos, hupatu satana, by Satan, kai ein, continuous, past, that's an imperfect tense form again. He was continuing with the wild beasts, and the angels were continuing, diakonun, auto, continuing to deacon him, diakonos. You hear that there a little bit. They were ministering to him. So in verse 13, the point I want to make here is three imperfect tense forms, and Mark is purposefully using this tense form to communicate a past continuous action. This was continuing on. He wants us to understand the duration of the 40 days. The duration of the 40 days, the duration of temptation by Satan, the duration of time with the wild beasts, the duration of angels ministering to him. And Mark has several instances of the imperfect, as do the other Gospels and Acts. Think about that a minute. Past continuous would provide authors of narrative, especially the Gospels and Acts, a way to describe action continuing to make it lively, though it's understood to be in the past, obviously. So it's important, and you'll see that as you get into exegetical work. But today, we just need to learn the basic grammar of the imperfect. As well as the aorist, it is a past tense form generally, or the imperfect always, the aorist generally, and it uses a prefix. And the prefixed forms, the past time forms, the imperfect and the aorist, use secondary tense form endings. Here's the master personal ending chart. We've already looked at the primary tense forms, and now today we learn the secondary, active and then middle. N, s, or the third singular, vacant, or the new, followed by men et n. So with the connecting vowel, ns, amen et n, and then in the middle passive, main saw, which the sigma will drop out because of the connecting vowel. It drops out. The omicron and the omicron contract to u, so main saw, which is u ta, metha setha nta. So all the way through the chart, the way that may just be helpful for you to memorize, o ace a, amen ete nsi, which goes to usin, my psi, which is a tai, metha setha ntai, ns amen ete n, main saw, which is u, ta, metha setha nta. You can hear in how quickly I go through these. They've been memorized for years, and you need to memorize them this week. You need to have these down. Just you're woken up at 4 a.m. You could be able to say these. They just need to be memorized. And if you know these personal endings, you will be able to know very quickly what that verb means by looking at the personal ending. You'll be able to tell primary or secondary. You're then going to know if it's imperfect or aorist, one of the past time forms, and then if it's first, second, or third person, singular or plural, active or middle passive. You're going to have the parsing down from these endings. Let's think about the components of the imperfect active indicative. You have the augment, the tense stem, the connecting vowel. The augment, again, is what sets the past time tense forms apart. And then the secondary endings. Here's the paradigm of the imperfect active indicative for luo. Eluon, you can see the connecting vowel pattern is the same. Omicron, because it's a new, any mu or new personal ending has omicron as the connecting vowel. And then you can see the personal endings, ns, or sometimes a new could be there. It would depend on the word. And then amen ete n. The components of the imperfect middle passive indicative, you have the augment, the present tense stem connecting vowel, and secondary passive ending, secondary middle or passive endings. And you can see main there for first singular. So the paradigm of the imperfect middle passive indicative and the endings, main saw ta, metha setha nta. Again, saw there, the second singular, sigma drops out. You have the epsilon omicron becoming u, and the remainder of the paradigm there. Past continuous, middle passive. Come back to the personal ending chart again. You'll need to just memorize this. And let's think for a minute about that augment. Again, the augment is the prefix that signals past time and which kind of ending, primary or secondary. It's the secondary endings. If the verb begins with a consonant, epsilon is the augment. Easy rule. If the verb begins with a vowel, then the augment is lengthened. Alpha lengthens to eta, epsilon to eta, omicron to omega, and eta stays the same. And then there's a diphthong pattern as well. If the verb is alpha iota, then you have an eta with iota subscript. You can see the rest of the pattern there. You just need to memorize these, be familiar with them, and they will become familiar as you read through the Greek New Testament and become more familiar with it. The contract verbs. Let me go to the next slide for just a moment so you can be reminded of the contract verb patterns, and then contract verbs in the imperfect. They follow these contract verb contract rules. So if you have a connecting vowel with a certain combination of vowels, then there's a contraction. And here is an example for agapao. And again, this is in mounts, and you can go back. It's just memorizing these, being familiar with them. The imperfect of ami, amain, ace, ain. Third singular ain is one of the most popular words in the New Testament. He, she, it was. And then you can see the pattern in the plural. Amen, ete, son, there. So this is the imperfect of ami. Remember, the imperfect uses the present tense form, or present tense stem, but it's distinguished because of the augment. So the augment gives it the past time, the present tense stem gives it the continuous aspect, and it uses secondary personal endings. And all of this here in the master verb chart. This chart will grow and grow through the year. So stay up on it each week. You can see now we have added the category, or the second column, the augment and reduplication. And now the vocab starter. Akalutheo, a call to follow. Didasko, didactic, I teach. Erotao, think of an error, I ask. And the root in parentheses. So that's the imperfect, important for exegesis. Look back at Mark 1, 12, and 13. You can see those three imperfects there. And enjoy the work this week.